Hey, it's Norm from Tested.com. I'm here outside of Atlanta, Georgia, at the home of Fred Bieser. Fred, thank you for inviting us here. You do something that's really interesting. Some people restore cars, old cars, some people restore old planes, but you restore old turrets. And when I say turrets, I mean the guns that were mounted on airplanes from World War II. Can you tell me a little bit about these turrets?
Sure. Turrets were invented right before World War II. They were invented by the British and were hydraulically powered. Once we got into the war, the British sent over some turrets for us to look at. Our industrial designers started designing their own turrets, which were electrically powered. It's actually better to have an electrically powered turret because hydraulic ones have 1,050 pounds of pressure of a flammable liquid, and the other guys are shooting flaming bullets at you,
Yeah,
so that's not a good thing. My goal is to restore 20 different turrets and have them in the same room. I restore most of them back to working condition, which is pretty rare. Turrets are one of the most undertold stories of World War II because there are so few of them that survive. There's not many of the aircraft left, and there's even a lot less of the turrets left. That's pretty much what I've done for the last 25 or 30 years. I've restored 7 turrets to working condition so far, all of them electric. Most of the turrets that I have here are under restored. When I get them, they're usually crumpled balls of rusty metal. This is a good example right here. This came off of an Avro Lancaster turret. It came from a Canadian World War II bomber, 4-engine bomber. Some of the turrets we have back here are B-24 tail turrets. They're hydraulically powered. We don't know much yet about hydraulics, so they're probably a few years off. The electric turrets we're really good at now. We can usually restore one in less than 6 months. The first turret restore is about a year.
Wow, so different types of turrets went on different types of planes, and
right.
Many of the planes in the heart of World War II had some of these turrets on them.
Yeah, they were strictly used on bombers, any kind of bombing aircraft, mostly 4-engine bombers, sometimes 2-engine bombers, and very rarely single-engine aircraft had turrets on them. British had a Defiant that took a turret on the back of it. Our Grumman Avengers had a turret on the back of it, also a single-engine plane.
And how are these operated for the most part?
Well, they were operated by gunners. They went to a gunnery school located around the United States, and they would go and train on these turrets and then go for a ride in the aircraft with the turret and shoot at either a drone or some sort of towed target sleeve to, train the gunners at them.
Wow, and they sat in the planes, another pilot flew the bomber, and they were sometimes inside like a shell,
yes.
And they just ran the turret.
Basically there were turrets on the nose of these bombers, the tops of the bombers, the tails of the bombers, and the bottom had a ball turret. Other gunners were located at waist windows.
And in restoring these, you gotta imagine these turrets come from a variety of manufacturers, right?
Right.
And so, what are some of the manufacturers and what are the differences between them?
My favorite was made by Emerson Electric out of St. Louis, Florissant Avenue in St. Louis. Bendix also was a big turret maker. Glenn L. Martin out of Baltimore. General Electric out of Rochester, New York. All of these industrial manufacturers that made lots of things during the war usually made turrets on the side. And very few of them survived today. When the war was over, the aircraft came back to the States because jets had just been invented and the turrets could not keep up with shooting at jets. They were usually removed from the aircraft and scrapped, so that's why there's so few of them today.
And so a weapons technology that was invented right before World War II in the UK, like you said, and it was obsolete by the time the war was over.
Right. By the end of the war, our B-29s had basically remote control turrets or robot turrets where the gunner sat in one part of the plane and the turret was actually in another part. They had really elaborate analog computer systems full of gears and pulleys, and they actually worked pretty well. At that time, of course, they were top secret, state-of-the-art. The Japanese and the Germans didn't have anything like them. And then once the war was over, the turrets and the propeller-driven aircraft were pretty much over with.
Well, let's take a look at some of these turrets and maybe something that is in the condition of when you first acquire it, and talk about how you'd go about thinking about restoring it.
Okay. As you can see, these turrets here are unrestored, and usually when I get them, they're crumpled balls of rusty metal. So I wish they were all this nice when I started on them. In the other room, we have some that are finished.
Yeah, let's go check this out.
Okay, this turret here was manufactured by Bendix Corporation out of South Bend, Indiana. They made about 9,900 of them. They were used on the nose of late model B17Gs. It's an all-electric turret. Again, it takes about a year to restore them. I've restored 3 of them so far to working condition. One of them is in a museum now in Savannah, Georgia, the 8th Air Force Museum. And this one I take around to air shows and museum events and let people operate them.
So it's in working order. This one's fully restored. And can you just call out some of the components and
Sure.
what you do to put pieces together?
Okay, this is the elevation gearbox and elevation drive motor. It's what makes the guns go up and down. The guns, by the way, are all fake. I'm creeped out by real guns. This is the drive motor and gearbox assembly that makes the turret spin. That's the left and right. Junction box, relay box, and this is the hand controller, which would have been mounted on an arm in the nose of the B-17. You have to go back and restore each little thing. You have to restore this motor and make this motor work on your bench before you can put it on the turret. Now, this is the hand controller for this turret. These are safety switches. They have to be held in at all time. Left and right is left and right. Up and down is up and down. Triggers for the guns if they had been real. And then these buttons on the top are the high-speed switches. They make it go really fast. Most turrets have limit switches to protect the airframe of the aircraft. There's an elevation limit switch system. It's what keeps the guns from hitting the bottom of the nose. There's also an azimuth limit switch assembly that keeps it from going side to side. These protect the aircraft airframe from the barrels of the gun.
It's a very analog mechanism where it's just a rod that taps a switch when the turret swings too far.
Crude but effective.
And when you started restoring these, what was your resource, your reference material to?
Well, I discovered turrets about 30 years ago and was just fascinated by them, and I was finding them in junkyards. And when I got them, they were literally crumpled balls of rusty metal. So I learned to work on turrets by taking the junker ones apart. And I would literally drill it apart, saw it apart, separate the good pieces from the junker ones, and then restore them, catalog them, put them in bins, and then they would be standing by. And after you take a half a dozen turrets of the same model apart, you generally have enough parts to put one back together. So that's the ratio. 6 junker turrets will equal 1 working turret.
And then you just have this big catalog now of parts that you've accumulated.
I do have mountains, just tens of thousands of turret parts that I've accumulated in the last 30 years. Plus, once you get the parts, you have to have the manuals to put them together. So I've collected manuals over the years as well. And then, of course, with the wonder of the internet now, there's a lot of things that I find on eBay in the way of turret parts or in the way of manuals or whatever. So it's real easy to find this stuff online.
All right, Fred, so tell us about this turret.
Okay, this turret is especially near and dear to my heart. It's the first turret I ever restored back in 2000. It was manufactured by Emerson Electric Company. What makes this turret so special is that it's in all original condition, and we believe it to be a combat veteran that actually flew in the skies of Europe.
And you think it's a combat veteran because there's some discoloration.
Yes. If you see right here, this is where the heat from the gun firing caused the paint to discolor, whereas everything forward of this was out in the windstream, and the cooling effect of the windstream protected the paint out here. This plexiglass is the original dome, which makes it incredibly rare because it's 70 years old and survived a war.
This is the kind of turret that someone actually sat in, and they just operated the controls and looked through a sight?
Yes. This particular turret was being late in the war. They had developed what was called a compensating sight by cranking in the altitude and the airspeed of the aircraft, which the pilot would tell them over the intercom, and it would mechanically compute the lead for the gunner, which made them much more accurate and gave them a much more success rate against the German and Japanese fighter planes.
Because on the controls, there's a mic button, and you're talking to the pilot. Pilot relays your altitude, your speed, and there are actually dials here to dial that in.
Yes.
And you're doing that as you're in combat,
Yes.
just so you can get the right lead on your firing. That is amazing.
Another thing about turrets is that when the aircraft took off, the gunners were not in the turrets in case there was a problem during takeoff. But once they got to the English Channel, then the gunners were required to get in their turrets and would stay there until they came back across the English Channel.
All right, Fred, so this looks like something you're in the process of restoring.
Yeah, this is a Martin 250 CE. It was a very popular design used on many aircraft during the war. We're about halfway through with it. We just got it riding on the bearings. The stand that it's on is a loose copy of the stand they used in the factory in Baltimore, Maryland. And as you can see, I'm spinning it around. By using this tilting stand, I'm able to get to the components which will be bolted on here in the very near future, and it will become a working turret as well.
And Fred, you said you've restored one of these turrets before, so let's take a look at what it looks like when this is fully restored.
Okay, it's right over here.
All right, Fred, so tell me about this turret.
Okay, it's a Martin 250 CE. It was manufactured by Glenn L. Martin in Baltimore, Maryland. It was a very popular turret, worked really good, used on many aircraft, at least a dozen different Allied aircraft.
Made by General Electric.
Well, General Electric was a subcontractor to most turret manufacturers. Even though this was manufactured by Martin in Baltimore, General Electric provided most all of the electrical system for it. This turret is a good example of what we mean by crumpled ball of rusty metal. It's so smashed and so demolished that we decided to leave it like it is. It's a very early model B-24 tail turret and it has a couple of unique features on it. Occasionally on a turret we'll find the gunner's name. If you look in the front here, it says dead end, watch out, and the gunner's name was L.B. McLeod. So if there's anybody out there that knows a family member of L.B. McLeod, we sure would like to hear from them.
Well, thank you so much, Fred, for inviting us over and showing us these beautiful, beautiful machines that you've restored. You have 3 done here, you've restored 7 now.
7 total to working condition.
And you want to get to 20.
Sure.
So you have so many parts, you're going to get there eventually. And the goal is to get this traveling to museums and show them off.
I've gone as far as Detroit, Michigan with them. We hope that once we get our inventory up enough that we can actually do a touring turret exhibit where we have a half a dozen different turrets that people can ride in. This particular turret, I've traveled for 14 years now, and I've had over 3,000 children ride in it during that time. So it's a great educational tool to teach Americans, mostly children, about our history of World War II.
Wow, kid-friendly.
Very kid-friendly.
Again, thank you so much. And you'll find more about Fred's turrets on tested.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find more stuff on our adventures down here in Atlanta, Georgia. Fred, again, thank you.
Thanks for being.
And I'm Norm. I'll see you next time.